Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. We're making SpaghettiOs. So.
But I don't see any cans.
Well, that's because
SpaghettiOs without cans.
I lost the can opener. Sorry. Today we're making adult SpaghettiOs. A lot of people remember things that they ate as a kid, and you taste them again and they're just not as good as they used to be. And so what we wanted to do with this dish is make an adult version that tasted good, that's something that was crave-worthy for an adult, easy to make, but it brought us back to being a kid and reminded us of what it was like to eat the canned version. When I was given this assignment, we actually had a big taste test. We bought cans of SpaghettiOs, opened them up and had them, and they're not as good as we remember. They're pretty sweet and pretty flat and kind of gross. Also, fake meatballs. SpaghettiOs are actually a pretty popular search term on the internet. Let's be honest, like people are looking for a good recipe. People are really nostalgic. They want the food of their childhood, and there are not, frankly, a lot of good recipes out there. It all boils down to a good meatball, a good sauce, and good pasta. So, to be honest, you can make the meatballs a little bigger and change out the pasta, and you've got a really nice spaghetti and meatball dish. So it's just taking those three basic components and turning them into something that's like a little bit more nostalgic. But, if you're a SpaghettiO hater, that's fine. Buy spaghetti and make a bigger meatball. It's fine. But this recipe, it's a really, really good meatball because it's super flavorful. The meatballs are really moist and tender. There's a technique that I'm going to show you that will basically ensure that your meatballs don't get packed and really hard and dense. And also, I like this cooking method. We're going to brown the meatballs and add them to the simmering sauce. So you'll get a little bit of flavor from the fond on the bottom of the pan, from the browning meatballs, and then you finish the meatballs in the sauce so they get all the flavor of the meatballs into the sauce. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a panade. This combination exists a lot in Italian cooking, so when you're making traditional meatballs, but also people do it for things like meatloaf. It's a way of ensuring that you're going to get a really, really tender, juicy meat. So it's used in ground beef preparations. So I have put panko breadcrumbs. I put some Parmesan, some oregano. This is red pepper flake. This is some garlic powder. Got some kosher salt. And you want to mix this in. I really like flavorful meatballs. I figure if you're going to do this, you might as well do it right. So there's quite a lot of flavor in there. And then you want to add your wet, now that that's all incorporated. So this is heavy cream and beaten egg. I'm using heavy cream. This is not traditional. Usually it's just whole milk, but I wanted it rich. I like flavorful everything. So the cream is going to add a little bit of fat. Sometimes ground beef can be a little lean. This is 80-20, so that means that it's 20% fat, which I normally like. There's a lot of flavor in that. Now I'm going to add the beef to this. Ground chuck. So what I like to do, and I do this for meatballs and for meatloaf, what I find to be the best technique for this is to take 2 forks and just pull the meat apart. It seems a little counterintuitive because it seems like you should be pushing it together, but this actually separates the clumps of meat, especially if you get this at your supermarket and it's, prepackaged in a little container and it's probably all squished together. This way you're breaking it up, so you're not compacting it. Also, as you break it up, all the panade is getting into the chuck. The easiest way to do this is with a really small ice cream scoop. You want them to be about 1 inch in diameters. We actually, a few years ago, we did a Nostalgia Week, and it was, like mac and cheese and cream of mushroom soup and all of these sort of old sloppy joes, things like that, things that you had as a kid that you might have actually liked coming out of a can or a box, but then when you taste it now, it's just really weird and synthetic and unpleasant. I'm just giving them a little bit of shape and making sure that they hold themselves together. All right, and we are ready to fry some meatballs. They don't eat fat around here. They don't eat sugar. They don't eat fat. I leave, the place goes to shit. Whatever. Yeah, but look at this, like the thinnest glaze on earth.
You know what? Andy's doing.
I know. Also, I'm using my hand. Sorry. Not sorry. So we're actually using 2 skillets because the sun's going down and we want to go home. No. We do this in batches, and someone dared me that I couldn't do this, so here we are. If you were at home doing this, you don't want to crowd the pan. Obviously, there's a lot of meatballs here. This is just going to make this process go a little bit faster. You just want to brown the meatballs on a couple of sides. They're going to get flat, and that's fine. We're not cooking them all the way through. We're just getting a little color. So in real life, you would basically just do your meatballs in two batches in the same skillet, and then use the drippings to cook your onions and garlic. If your beef rendered too much fat, or you're not really into all the fat, you can take some of it out. You need a little bit just to keep the onion from sticking to the bottom of the pan. So this is gonna go about 5 minutes. We just wanna soften. We don't really want a lot of color, but there's so much flavor at the bottom of this. Like all of that, the beef fat and the cream, garlic and the oregano, all of those flavors are here, and they're gonna meld with the onions. I'm going to hit it with a little kosher salt and pepper. This will help pull some of the sugar out of the onion. That'll give us a light caramel, which will add to the flavor. And yeah, just gonna let this go for about 5 minutes. All right. It's been about 5 minutes. I'm gonna add the tomato paste. What I usually do whenever I add tomato paste to things, usually there's other vegetables in the pan. I'm gonna push them to the side. I'm gonna add the tomato paste on the empty side, and I'm just gonna kind of smear it into the pan. This way you get a little more surface area, and what I wanna do is kind of cook and brown the tomato paste. You can see it's bright red. I wanna cook it for about a minute until it goes a nice brick red color. If the onion looks like it's getting a little too brown, then you can go ahead and like give it a little stir. And at this point, just mix it in. Now I like my tomato sauce to be a little bit on the spicy side, and so I'm gonna add a little bit of red pepper flake. I also like using paprika. I feel like it adds like a really nice little back note, and it kind of takes it from the kid space to more of an adult space. Okay, so that's ready to go. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some tomatoes. These are actually whole canned tomatoes that I pureed in a food processor. I'm also gonna add a little bit of sugar. I don't normally like sugar in my tomato sauce, but because it's the SpaghettiOs, it is a part of the dish. I'm gonna bring this to a boil, and I'm gonna nestle in some basil. Just a few sprigs of basil. Again, just giving it a nicer little depth of flavor. Once this comes to a boil, I'll reduce it to a simmer, and then we'll just let that cook for about 20 to 30 minutes to reduce down, and then we'll add the meatballs to finish cooking in the last 10 minutes. So while the sauce is cooking, let's talk pasta. So this is anelli. So in the recipe, we call for anelletti or ditalini. Basically what you want is an O-shaped pasta. The differences are gonna be in the length of the pasta. So you want a short, tubular, O-shaped pasta. I have some boiling water over here. It needs to be salted. I am adding quite a bit of salt. It should definitely taste like the sea. I have 12 ounces of my anelli pasta. I'm going to give it a little bit of a stir, just to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. And our sauce is simmering nicely over here. I'm going to add the meatballs in. These are almost completely cooked all the way through. They only need about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the thickness and size. You just want to nestle them in, make sure they're nice and covered in the sauce. Smells really good. So if we've timed this correctly, our meatballs will be done at the same time as our SpaghettiOs, and then we can put everything together. All right, I believe this pasta is done. So now we're gonna take this over to the sink and drain it. We actually had a long debate about this a long time ago, whether it's better to use tongs or a spider to pull pasta out of water. I'm a big fan of doing this. All right, now we're just going to add this to that. And if you see more basil, just pull it out as you stir. And just be careful because the meatballs are a little bit delicate. Yeah. All right. I've made dinner. Who's hungry?
What are we eating?
No, just
This
eat
is
it right out of there.
SpaghettiOs.
Oh, I remember your SpaghettiOs.
You do?
You did this when I started working in a test kitchen. Like,
Oh wow.
is it, I shouldn't be eating this, but
I know.
thank you.
I'm gonna
What do you
have
mean
one
I
bite.
know? Who's like,
Oh my God! Come. Yeah.
I'm not big
There's
mine.
what? Here. For you,
For the
darling.
freaking party. Thank you.
It is a
When you said SpaghettiOs, I honestly thought for a second that you were like doing like a Claire's take on gourmet mates
Oh.
and making like SpaghettiOs.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Corians from
Not
scratch.
quite that adventurous.
This is
Yeah.
tastes way better than
A lot better.
that. Like tenfold.
Like
Very
actual
good.
recognizable chunks of tomato.
I know.
Wild,
Funny that.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, do you need this?
No, it's all yours.
Tight. Okay.
If you need more, there's like, a good pot left.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that is adult SpaghettiOs.
What if we couldn't get the rights to SpaghettiOs and we just had to bleep that out every time in this video? Uh-oh. Today we're just
Spaghetti.
uh-oh.
Spaghetti zero. Or spaghetti Oz.
Spaghetti ounces. Spaghetti ounces.